Today we've got David Andelman, a columnist for USA Today. Hello, David. Great to have you here. As always, also with us, Vincent Michelot, a U.S. politics professor at the very elite Sciences Po University. Here on my left, a U.S. foreign policy analyst, Laurie Dundon. Hi, Laurie.
Hi.
And Angela Diffley, our colleague from RFI, who is here as well with us on the set. David, let me start with you. You've been keeping a close eye on the results as they come in. Tell us what's the latest.
Well, the latest right now is, by time, is Wyoming has just come in. So we're starting to move west. Wyoming, of course, only has 3 electoral votes, and it was certainly always in the Donald Trump camp. There's no doubt about that. New York was, of course, always pretty much a Clinton lock. She was the senator from New York, so that was not really a big surprise. It was a great relief, probably, for the folks at Clinton headquarters. But we're still waiting for some of the key the key battleground, Pennsylvania, for instance, North Carolina, and, of course, Florida, which is the big kahuna. Now, it is interesting that apparently some of the networks have called Marco Rubio as the winner in Florida for the Senate race, the Republican. He was polling, however, considerably ahead of Trump all evening, so that really was not a big surprise, but that is another indication that the Democrats may have a harder time really picking up even an even hand in the Senate.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that, because obviously this isn't just a presidential election today there in the United States. It's also an election of the Senate, of the House. But the House seems to be given more or less at this point for the Republicans. We'll keep an eye on that throughout the day, but that does seem to be the word. The Senate, though, is where things could really get interesting, with possibly a flip to the Democrats for the Senate. Vincent, explain to us a bit more about how that works, and do the Democrats really have their shot to take back the Senate?
Well, another network actually just called Indiana for the Republicans, and that's a big disappointment for the Democrats, because this is one of the states that they were hoping to pick up. And as it is right now, the Democrats' chances of regaining a majority in the Senate are relatively slim. They could make it to 50, which in the case of the election of Hillary Clinton would make it a Democratic Senate, because Tim Kaine would be the deciding vote.
The vice president.
The vice president. But what we're looking at right now is a House of Representatives, which is still going to be a Republican House, a Senate which is going to probably be either 50-50 or 49-51. Maybe 48-52, in which case it would be for the Republicans, and a presidential election, which not only hinges, and this is one thing that I would like to emphasize, on Florida, because as much as there is no path to the White House for Donald Trump without Florida, it has to be said that there is a path to the White House without Florida for Hillary Clinton. It's a very narrow one, and it's based on the idea that she does win Virginia, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and that blue wall in the Midwest holds, but for the time being, let us indeed focus on Florida, but let us not forget that, for example, if Virginia were to go red again, it would be a major piece of trouble for Hillary Clinton.
All right.
Could we go back to the Senate just for a moment? Sure. We do know that Tammy Duckworth has won projected to win in Illinois. That's one pickup for the Democrats. They needed 4 pickups to make it to 50-50. So they have 1 now. There's a very good chance they could pick up Pennsylvania. They did, unfortunately, lose Indiana, but frankly, towards the end, Evan Bayh, the Democrat, was such a weak candidate. He couldn't even tell reporters the address of his home in Indiana, because he spent so little time there, frankly. So that was really pretty unlikely all along. There is still a chance for a 50-50 Senate, but it's fading.
All right, thank you for that, David. Let's go now to Washington, D.C., where our Doug Herbert is standing by. Doug, as we're getting these results in little by little, one thing that we are noticing as we're following the U.S. media, at least, is how much intense pressure they are under to get it right, if you like, when it comes to these results. Is the U.S. media doing anything differently this time?
Well, no, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jeannie, one thing we have seen, and this has been true since 2000, the U.S. media, the major networks that are ones that make projections about the states when the polls close, they've really revamped their entire game. They've instituted much more rigorous methods. They're much more cautious, much more prudent in the methods they use before they actually make a projection, which is one of the reasons, perhaps tonight, it seems like in U.S. elections, if you're watching from the outside world, it always seems like you end up staring at either Florida or Ohio, long into the night. And one of the reasons that we are still looking and everyone's watching and waiting with Florida is precisely because networks, big U.S. networks such as CNN, which a lot of Americans watch for their projections, are much more cautious. They are not going to project or call a state, especially one as crucial with its 29 electoral votes as Florida. And so that's one of the reasons that we're still looking at it. Everyone's still looking at it. They're not making any calls yet. Jeannie, I would like to bring in someone, though, here who's a Democratic strategist. I've been speaking to a lot of strategists tonight, both on the Republican and Democratic side. Josh Nanberg, step into the frame. Well, thanks for being here. You've worked on all sort of levels of the U.S. government in various campaigns, from Clinton to, you could tell me, even the Obama, right, going back. Let me ask you something. If you were right now sitting with the Clinton people tonight, you're looking at these battleground maps. You're looking at the map in general. We were hearing the talk about if she doesn't get Virginia, if she weren't to get Florida, how nervous would you be? If you were a strategist for Hillary Clinton right now, what would you be saying to try to reassure her?
Without Virginia, I'd be very, very nervous. Florida, there's still obviously a number of paths for Hillary Clinton to win. Without Virginia, without Virginia and Florida, I would say it gets a lot tighter. There's still a lot of electoral votes to be had out west. Nevada, I think, from what I've heard from people on the ground, there's a 50 to 70,000 vote cushion just from Latino votes and early votes. And also you look at Florida, there's 6.5 million people who voted early in Florida. If you look at some of the vote predicting websites that were out today, Hillary Clinton had, by strictly predictive methods, exceeded Barack Obama's number from 2012. I would not be panicking yet.
Okay, you're saying not panicking yet. However, going into this election night, we heard so much about Hillary Clinton's ground game, how it was so much outpacing Donald Trump's ground game, and that essentially her campaign was saying her ground game was strong enough, it would deliver the results she wanted in states like Florida. Why isn't this more of an open and shut case?
I think we have to look at where the votes are coming from. And if you look at the map of Florida, yes, most of the votes are in, but you have to look at the big areas where votes are still out. And that's where the ground game is going to matter. It's the urban areas, it's Tampa, it's St. Petersburg, it's Miami. Those are places where votes tend to come in slower, but where the ground game is going to be stronger.
Yeah, we talk a lot about this so-called, if Hillary Clinton were not to get sort of the Southeast, or that were to be a blowout in this, she has her so-called firewall. And when Americans speak of the firewall, we're talking about the white working class, mostly states in the Midwest, upper Midwest. Can she afford to lose any of those states very briefly?
She can't. I don't think she will.
That was very brief. Listen, it's a very tense night. Everyone's watching. The battleground states are very much in contention right now. It could be a long night as well. Back to you, Jeannie.
All right, Doug, thank you so much for that. That's France 24's Doug Herbert there speaking to us from D.C. I want to bring in now Laurie Dundas a bit more to talk about the Republican Party in the wake of this vote, regardless of who wins, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. One thing is clear, the GOP, I think, will never be the same.
Oh, I think absolutely you're right on that. And I think, the path that Trump took, continually battling the party, not just once or twice at the outset, but again and again taking on the Republican establishment to demonstrate not only he's a unique candidate, but he's not necessarily going to listen to their advice or stay with consistent views, whether that's on domestic or foreign policy. The establishment would not rein him in any way. And so that, I think, leaves what is seen as the establishment within the party as a decision. Do they, if it were a Trump presidency, would they want to flat out confront him, try to run as much as they could through Congress around him, Or if it's a Hillary presidency, it gives the Republicans a good chance to kind of step back and say, we've got 4 years. We probably have a pretty good chance in the next election cycle towards a Republican presidency and not a two-term Hillary. So what would we do to really reform our party? The party's been shaken at fundamental levels, and there's a lot of internal disagreement about how you would make reforms, where you would make reforms, and what the ideology of the party wants to be.
I guess another question is why is Trump so popular? Is he just a giant symbol for this mass desire for political revival in the United States? I mean, he's so different from what seems to be his core voter. Angela.
He's offering very simple solutions. It's a well-known phenomenon. It's the same as Marine Le Pen in some ways. Very simple solutions to highly complex problems. Mostly, these disaffected white working-class men are suffering through the effects of globalization, which is a worldwide phenomenon. There is no simple solution to that. And also the technological revolution. He can't bring back jobs as simply as that. And I think if he wins, he will have to face the fact that he doesn't have simple answers to these very, very complex problems. Equally, if Hillary Clinton wins, she will have to deal with almost half of America very angry about the same issues, which he can't fix so easily either.
David Andelman.
Well, the other dimension, you're absolutely right about all of that. There is one more dimension, of course, to it. Donald Trump is a television star. He came into millions of people's homes every week on Apprentice, Celebrity Apprentice, and so on. You're fired. That became his mantra. You know, he was a genuine star. And now he can, and not only that, he's a billionaire. And he was able to sell that, even if he really isn't a billionaire. Nobody's really quite sure about how much money he really does have. He was able to sell his concept of success. His name is on all of these enormous buildings all over the country and so on. People understand that kind of success. They want to have a part of it. They want to think that he can bring that magic to their lives as well.
Vincent?
There's an additional point. With the exception of Ronald Reagan and then George Bush Sr., never has a party since 1945 won 3 presidential elections in a row. And this is definitely a change election when voters want change. And Hillary Clinton obviously cannot embody that form of change in any way. She has been, as Donald Trump has repeated many, many, many times in politics for 30 years. There is a need for her to emphasize continuity with the Obama administration. And then you have Trump as an agent of change, incarnating literally change, even if that change is undefined, unrefined, and very hazy to a lot of Americans.
We should reassure all of our viewers at this point in the evening, even though Trump is leading 129 to 97, we haven't quite reached the 20% mark in terms of how many votes have actually been counted. We're not even a fifth of the way there. Some of the biggest states have not yet come in. On the other side, it's a bit concerning that some states like Virginia, which should have been clearly a Clinton state, Tim Kaine was both governor and senator from Virginia, Hillary's running mate, those have not yet been called for one side or another. So while we don't have a lot of data in yet, nevertheless, there's still a lot. It's going to be a long night. It's not going to be an easy fix.
Indeed. All right. We were talking earlier about these divisions within the GOP party. Donald Trump being such a divisive candidate within his own party. Let's take a closer look now at just how his candidacy has affected the GOP.
Win or lose, Donald Trump has shaken up the US political landscape. And win or lose, he leaves the Republican Party in a state of shock. Trump beat 16 rivals in the primary, but his no-holds-barred campaign alienated many in the party.
I'll tell you what I really think of Donald Trump. This man is a pathological liar.
Indeed, Trump's refusal to tread the party line on traditional Republican values like free trade and abortion put him on a collision course with the party establishment.
For most of his life, he has described himself as very pro-choice and as a supporter of partial birth abortion. Right now, today, as a candidate, he supports federal taxpayer funding for Planned Parenthood. I disagree with him on that. That's a matter of principle, and I'll tell you.
Liar.
Donald Trump's bombastic campaign, though, poisoned relations with the party leadership. Many boycotted his coronation as the candidate at the convention in July. And anger grew as Trump continued to attack revered pillars of Republican values like the military, as he criticized a Muslim family that had lost a son fighting in Iraq. That simmering resentment boiling over in the wake of sex assault allegations in October.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Whatever you want. Grab them by the...
But as the Trump brand became politically toxic, senior Republicans withdrew their support. House Leader Paul Ryan saying he would no longer campaign for his party's candidate. Trump hitting back on Twitter, calling Ryan, who is the highest-ranking Republican, disloyal. In many ways, Trump's repudiation of the GOP mainstream is part of his strategy, and it's at the heart of his populist message.
I have joined the political arena so that the powerful can no longer beat up on people who cannot defend themselves. Nobody knows the system better than me. Which is why I alone can fix it.
Trump appealing not just to party loyalists, but also to millions of voters demanding change.
When I came here, I was praying for America. And I feel like we're getting our answer with Donald Trump.
Whatever the outcome, Trump's message has struck a chord with disgruntled voters fed up with the status quo. But that narrow appeal may not prove a vote winner for the GOP in future elections.
All right, this is election night in the United States. Let's take a look now at just how things stand in the race between the Democrat Hillary Clinton and the Republican Donald Trump. We can now confirm that Texas has gone to Donald Trump. Texas with its 38 electoral votes. No real big surprise there. Texas is such a traditionally Republican state. Now let's take a closer look at where we stand now in the United States of America with the votes that we do have so far in the states that we can call for you. There you can see Donald Trump with 129 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton with 97 electoral votes. I'm going to turn now to my panelists again who are with me on the set. Where do we stand? David.
Well, it's interesting. There's a chap in New York, Tom Gardner, who has run these numbers for a number of. He has a website called Born to Run the Numbers, and he's a real expert on these sorts of things. What he suggests is that in fact Trump is probably going to lead in the electoral votes until somewhere around 5:30 in the morning Paris time, which is 11:30 in the East Coast. At that point, some of the very big states should start coming in, like Michigan, California certainly, and so on, that will put Hillary in the lead. He projects a little bit of a wider lead, I suspect, and some numbers are starting to suggest right now. He suggested it will be 322 to 213. But up until that point, that Donald Trump will have a lead through much of the evening, and he certainly does. So we still have to see how this plays out. Florida is still a wild card. Virginia, very surprisingly, is a wild card. Pennsylvania is still in play, and so on.
We have just heard, though, that Clinton has taken the state of Connecticut on the East Coast. I think we've got that map that's going to be coming up for you in just a moment. All right, if not, Connecticut now officially has been, here it comes. Connecticut, with its 7 electoral votes, has gone to Hillary Clinton, 52.7% to just under 43% there for Donald Trump. Now, there were quite a bit of early voters this time around. I think perhaps the most that we've seen in recent election cycles. Early voting, obviously, something very important, particularly for Hillary Clinton, it seems, in regards to her results. So what are your thoughts on early voting, Lori?
Well, I think the Democrats in particular have been excited and enthusiastic about the early voting numbers. The early voting numbers they saw in Florida were at historic levels, historic numbers of Latinos in particular in the early voting numbers. In North Carolina, they saw some optimistic minority early voting, not quite what they had hoped on the African-American vote, but across the board, and even in the Southwest, Nevada, very much a changing state, they saw good news. The Democrats, though, do have a tendency to grab on to that good news at the outset and perhaps overread into it. So it does not necessarily indicate this is where election night is going to go. But it fits into their narrative that this is a new set of voters, that the demographics are changing, and that they represent this new America as it expands and as the electorate grows. So that's their narrative. Early voting fit into it. We'll see where election night takes us.
Of course, some of those early votes would have been cast while the FBI director had reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. So we don't know, and they don't know how that played into how people voted.
That's all.
Another thing that you might want to add is also the fact that the rules on early voting changed a lot from 212 to 216, that some states, for example, restricted early voting. That's the case of North Carolina. That other states shortened the period, or other states had voter ID laws that made it, again, more difficult for early voters. So using the numbers of 212 or 208 in order to ascertain what those early votes means is a little bit presumptuous in my opinion.
Indeed. However, there have been about some 40% of early votes that were cast before. Of course, the big day is today, Election Day. What's really key on Election Day is the ground game, is getting people to the ballots, making sure they can vote effectively, making sure they do actually get out the door and vote. And it does seem across the board as if Hillary Clinton's campaign has a bit stronger ground game than Donald Trump's. Lori.
Well, I think Hillary Clinton's campaign strategy has been, again and again, go back to what you know, prepare for it for years, build the structure, and use it to outreach. And that's what she did on trying to get voters engaged. They really tried to reach out with as much formalized information as they could to register new voters. Let's get as many registered. Let's have a huge get out the vote effort. Let's focus on building as many fundraising for as many field offices. They've, over the last week, been opening, moving offices around, moving priorities around, and they had all of that structure to do so. And they also made a concerted effort, especially in the last weeks, to outreach to millennials. They knew that was a weak point for them. And they had, in the last couple of months, in the last, let's say, 8 weeks or so, really tried to build up their presence on college campuses, some high-profile social events with all the recent, Hollywood stars, the NBA players, the huge concerts. All of that was let's jazz up the campaign, get out to millennials. So they made a concerted effort. Trump, at his core, has been non-traditional in every single effort. He has reached out to what he thinks are new voters that were not heard before, and we'll see if the non-traditional way works for him.
One of Trump's big base, of course, seems to be these blue-collar voters. We keep talking about these working-class voters in industrial states. And for a bit more on that, now I want to go to France 24's Douglas Herbert, who is in Washington, D.C. Doug, you were telling me that earlier you were speaking to a top leader in the biggest trade union there in the States, the AFL-CIO. What did the person you were speaking to earlier have to say about the role of this so-called blue-collar worker in this campaign?
As we were talking about the changing sort of demographics and the shifts in the working class vote in America, the trade union worker as a leader that I was speaking to, the AFL-CIO was founded back in the 50s, and back then, Democrats were a solid base of workers were a solid base of the Democratic Party, and he said that started really shifting decades back, not just with Trump and everything. Really, under Reagan, you started to see a defection of those traditionally Democratic workers over to the Republicans. Donald Trump, of course, has tapped into a very rich vein of disaffection, anger, resentment, marginalization among the workers of America. So it's not taken for granted in America, not by a long shot anymore, that workers vote Democratic. One of the main reasons we've seen Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump campaigning very, very, very hard in states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Rust Belt, working class areas of those states in the end game of the campaign. I would like to just briefly bring on someone who's joining me here, a Republican strategist, someone who worked formerly with the George W. Bush, a staffer with the George W. Bush presidency. And he's seen it all on the Republican side. Now, David Almasy, thanks for being here. I want to just tell our viewers right away, you're not pro-Trump by any means, but I'm just curious, you do have a sense of Republican politics. When you're looking at what's going on here tonight, and we don't know how the Midwest and those Rust Belt states are shaping up yet, what's your vibe? What's going through your mind? It's a slugfest right now in those battlegrounds.
Absolutely. Well, of course, every step of the campaign, the establishment Republicans here in Washington, D.C. have looked at the Donald Trump candidacy and thought, there's no way this person can win, but he proved us wrong in the primaries, and now here we are on election night, and we're seeing a large turnout from folks, in these battleground states. And I think, there's a silent group of people out there who may not have been as vocal during the campaign, whether on social media or bumper stickers or yard signs, who are supporting Trump, and they definitely turned out to vote tonight, that's for sure.
One of the dominant issues that Donald Trump brought up time and again and again and again, and his supporters too, at all the rallies, was that the pollsters are wrong. I remember at the conventions he came out and the first thing he said is, we're going to win big. We're going to win so big. The pollsters, though, generally, it's been the average of polls. Do you generally believe still that the polls we've been seeing in the lead up to this campaign, from where we are at this hour, do you still generally think the pollsters were right?
Well, first of all, polls are just a snapshot in time, right? There's a lot of different events that affect the polls, even leading up to the last 48 hours of this campaign. There's a lot of different issues that have changed voters' minds in some ways. As President Bush used to say, there's only one poll that matters, and that's the one on election night, and we're seeing that tonight.
But we heard our presenter in the studio, Jeannie Gojula, was speaking about the so-called ground game, and it's been, Hillary Clinton's ground game has been really talked up. She's supposed to have a very strong one. Donald Trump virtually no ground game, and yet he seems to be bringing out the voters in some of the states we've been hearing the returns from tonight.
Yeah, the ground game traditionally has been strong for the Democrats. I think it was pointed out by one of your former guests that they've had 3 presidential cycles with their husband too, and 1 for her. So they've got a lot of these things already nailed down. And with Trump, I think it's just the sentiment of the voters. They felt compelled to go out to the polls, and that's what we're seeing.
And finally, you were worked with George W. Bush and everything. Obviously, we know that the Republicans who tried to, the other 16 Republicans in the primary season were all knocked out by Donald Trump. What do you think in general where this leaves the Republican Party, whether or not Donald Trump, how he fares tonight? Where are they tomorrow morning or Thursday or Friday?
Well, there's no question that there's a clear divide in the party. Those who support Trump, those who have been traditional Republican establishment folks here in Washington. And I think that regardless of what happens at the end of this election, there has to be some sort of repairing of the breach here between the two viewpoints, because otherwise the party will not be successful moving forward.
David Almasy, and repairing of the breach, some people have said to us on air, a rebuilding of the Republican Party, and also the Democrats, obviously, a lot of self-introspection to do. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Douglas.
Jeannie, I'll throw it back to you. Obviously, we're going to be spending perhaps a long night here, staring at that map in a lot of those battleground states.
You said it, Doug. Thanks so much. That's our Doug Herbert there, reporting from Washington, D.C. Now we're going to go not far from Doug to Arlington, Virginia, with France 24's Francois Picard. Francois, tell us a bit about what you've been observing there today in Virginia.
Well, Virginia, we've had several days because there was the actual vote count that we watched earlier nearby in Falls Church. We saw a record turnout there. Now we're in the Washington suburb of Arlington, Virginia, in the north of the state. And here we're at a Democratic Party watching party. I don't know if maybe we can turn over there inside. People are watching on the big screens. Now, at the start of the evening, we heard a lot of cheers. Not so much right now. Here we got a group of young people. I'm with her. Woo! All right. So enthusiasm, but a little bit of tension nonetheless, because the early returns, Donald Trump still in the lead. There's some 80% of the vote that had been counted. He held a 2 percentage point edge, but the northern more urban districts of the county, some of them yet to report. So it really is too close to call in this swing state. We're pleased to say hello. Nice to see you as well, to the chair of the Arlington County Board. Thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Now, tell us, Libby Harvey, the vote is close, and is it closer than you thought it would be? Earlier, one of your campaign chairmen was crowing we'd have a result by now.
Yeah. You're talking about the result nationally, not my own, right?
No, yeah. Virginia,
yes. Although they haven't, we have to count the absentee votes. It really is, the state is big, but most of the people live here. and most of them will vote Democrat. It's closer than I just don't like any of it being close. So we'll see. I think we're all nervous. We all are. I think we're going to be all right, but you don't know.
All right. We heard our own Douglas Herbert earlier saying the Democrats have great ground game here. We have all kinds of volunteers, people who've been canvassing, manning phones, all that. Donald Trump, no ground game, and yet it's so close. Why?
Do you know, I think we're all going to be asking ourselves that for a really long time. Let's see in the end if it's that close. It's really hard to say. There are a lot of, this country, I think we're like much of the world. Let's put it this way. I think France too. All right, so we're in a tip of a transition. So you have urban areas like here. People are educated. People are sophisticated. So moi, je parle un peu le français. J'étais au dehors. J'habitais les autres pays. But then there are other people who only speak English, do not have much education. They don't have very good health care. They're in almost a different world. So what they're looking for is very different, and to some extent, a connected world frightens them. But that's the future. That's what we have to do. But it frightens them. And I think you see it around the world. That's what you're seeing in the Middle East, right? And I think you have that in Europe. You've got Marine Le Pen, right? You've got these two forces. Two forces. And one, you move forward with diversity, and you need to be kind, you need to be brave and courageous, but you need to move forward. And others who are afraid and angry, I think the anger comes from fear, and that's pulling us back, and we've got to move forward as a world.
One race, by the way, which isn't close, is yours. You're running for re-election.
Yes. And it appears I have about 70% of the vote. I'm fine. But that's here in Arlington, so it's a smaller area, and I'm comfortable with everybody. They know me. I've done a good job. That's what counts here. This is a very informed electorate here. So,
congratulations.
Thank you so much.
All right, so there you have it, Jeannie. It's a tight race in Virginia. We could say a nail biter, and as you can see, two Virginias is what Libby Harvey was describing a moment ago. Should be pointed out, this is a state that used to always be Republican. It voted for Barack Obama twice. If for a third time it votes for the Democrats, it really shows a shift. We've been talking about the shift in some of the Rust Belt areas, but there could be a shift that's on the way in southern states like this one because we are in the south of the United States here.
All right, Francois, thank you so much for that. That's our Francois Picard. They're reporting for us there from Arlington, Virginia. David Andelman with us also on the set. You wanted to weigh in on Virginia as well?
Yes, just a little bit. Originally this was supposed to have been a slam dunk for Clinton Kane. Kane, after all, was her running mate.
He was a senator.
He was a senator and governor of Virginia, and his entire political career was built around Virginia. His wife is a Virginian, and in fact, his wife's father, I believe, was governor of Virginia at one point. So this should have been a slam dunk, and for a long time, in fact, the Clinton campaign pulled all their advertising out of Virginia, figuring it was just such a slam dunk that they could put their money elsewhere. And then all of a sudden they began to panic. Money began coming back in. It became sudden, and suddenly tonight we have a nail biter in a state that should not have been. And hopefully that is not. But we'll see what's going to happen. Whether that's going to be a symbol for the rest of the country.
New Hampshire, not far there from Virginia. Vincent, you wanted to weigh in a bit on the situation in New Hampshire at the moment.
Well, I think New Hampshire is not so much important in terms of the number of votes in the Electoral College that it's going to deliver, but as an indication, and for two reasons. If they're so close, it means that probably Kelly Ayotte, the Republican candidate for the Senate, is going to win that election. And clearly, Hillary Clinton is underperforming in Virginia. So at this point, there are clear indications that and especially comparing to what the polls, the latest polls were telling us, and a majority of those polls, that it's a very significant performance on the part of Trump and Clinton below expectations.
Right. New Hampshire, of course, is Bernie Sanders' country as well. So many of the Democrat voters there are not very favorable towards Hillary Clinton. They will vote for her or not, but not with great enthusiasm.
We were talking a lot about these swing states throughout the campaign as well, swing states that go from Florida to Michigan to Pennsylvania. We're still waiting for many of the results on those swing states, but until they come in, let's just take a closer look now at just how important they are.
Just an ordinary day on the campaign trail. both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump on the stump in Florida. The Sunshine State is at the heart of the 2016 election. It's one of the so-called swing states that will decide the outcome. To reach the White House, a candidate needs a majority of the Electoral College. That means at least 270 of the 538 state electors that are spread unevenly around the 50 states. Heavily populated states are more valuable, handing inordinate influence to the few major states that are still up for grabs. In all, around a dozen out of the 50 states will really count. Prime amongst them, Pennsylvania with 20 electoral votes. With its split between urban voters and Rust Belt regions, it encapsulates much of America in the 21st century. North Carolina is a must-win for Trump, and its recent racial tensions could be decisive. And Ohio, with 18 votes, is a key bellwether state. It's chosen the winner since 1964. But the biggest prize of all is Florida, with its 29 electoral votes. The state's diverse community, as well as the large number of independents, make it hard to predict. In 2000, Florida was decisive. Out of the almost 6 million ballots cast, Al Gore lost by less than 600 votes, handing the state and the keys to the White House to George W. Bush. But 2016 is a race unlike almost any other, with once safe states like Arizona brought back into play. The scale of that shift in the electoral landscape will decide who'll be the next occupant of the Oval Office.
All right, just to give you the very latest update now on what we know so far in the U.S. race to the White House. At this point in time, Donald Trump has 137 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton has 104 electoral votes. You can see there on that map. We're still waiting for many, many states to close and to come in. In the meantime, as you can imagine, social media has gone nuts with this campaign since the beginning for the past year and a half almost. I feel like we've been watching this more on social media than on any other media, more than any other campaign. We've got our James Creedon, who is Mr. Media Watch, to take a look at what's happening right now. First of all, you want to start with Politico that's talking about how Trump's giving Clinton a bit of a scare.
That's right. So just a quick look at the news websites first, and then we'll get to the social media footprint. Trump gives Clinton a scare. That's the updated headline on Politico. You're seeing their headlines being updated every 10, 15 minutes right now as news trickles in. Maps being updated as well as various states declare. This is drudgereports.com, and they are highlighting, I suppose, the states that are to be watched closely: Florida, North Carolina, Ohio. Meanwhile, HuffingtonPost.com, look at that. It's getting scary, Florida tied. So Huffington Post very much pro-Clinton in all of their coverage, and clearly perhaps a reassessment of just how comfortable Clinton's victory had been predicted to be. Meanwhile, at Salon.com, they had been using some kind of unreliable indicators, really. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to show it to you. Here we go. Donald Trump maybe toast, they were saying a couple of hours ago. Location data analysis suggesting high black and Latino turnout propelling Hillary Clinton to victory. But then if you look at other projections coming on the New York Times website, the gap appears to have been closing as the evening has gone on. Now, I appear to be having a little bit of trouble with showing you these links for now, so perhaps we could come back to it in a few moments' time.
Indeed.
But certainly lots happening on social media, and we'll keep track of it.
All righty. Can you talk a little bit more about the Trump supporters, about what's been going on with them?
Well, Trump supporters are updating their Twitter pages to I suppose fet various states as they have declared, and there's a lot of excitement. The social media director for the Trump campaign has been putting up these graphics, Fox News projections, ticking off each state as it comes in. So quite a lot of fetting going on there. Also a lot of encouragement vis-a-vis Florida voters. You can see there Dan Scavino thanking South Carolina. Also a lot of eyes on Florida. A lot of people encouraging Florida voters to get out, evening voters being very crucial in this. Also, this is worth bearing in mind. Remember, Hillary will pick up a quick 50 electoral votes once California comes in. So I suppose if people are looking at those numbers and on the Clinton side worried about her lagging behind, there are some big states to come in that are likely to vote for Clinton. Now, one further, I think I'll be able to show you now that New York Times projection, and you can see there as the evening goes on, the blue line for Clinton going down, and Trump, his projections on the rise. Now, Nate Silver, who's been accurate for pretty much all recent elections, elections. He hasn't been tracking in his updates the evening as it's progressed, but his final update did call it for Clinton at 71.4% chance of winning. Now, Breitbart, which is essentially aligned with the Trump campaign, they are providing a caveat for Nate Silver's projections, which he himself said polling errors could be higher than usual thanks to late breaking undecided. So this is, I suppose, a hallmark of this particular election. It's so difficult to predict. Something I heard as well in the last week or so is that as people were trying to poll voters, there was a hugely high incidence of people hanging up their phones, and you could imagine that they might have been, for example, Trump supporters who didn't want to necessarily declare they were Trump supporters. This massive wave of, I suppose, the silent majority as the Trump campaign has been calling them. So I suppose that is a factor this time around. Polls are harder they're just less predictable, I suppose.
Just to wrap up, James, there have been different means of showing support for certain given candidates, particularly in regards to Hillary Clinton and the so-called pantsuit movement that's been popping up for the past week or so.
That's right. Just to show you a couple of images of that, you have no one better suited for the job. These are the sort of, I suppose, campaigns that have been going on. Some 2 million people joined a Facebook group encouraging everybody to wear pantsuits today. And I was sent some images such as these from San Francisco showing people pantsuiting up in support of Hillary Clinton. You also had people visiting the grave of Susan Anthony, who was a famous suffragette.
Susan B. Anthony.
Susan B. Anthony, indeed. Absolutely. And you can see there are people sticking their I voted stickers on her headstone in a bid to draw attention to that. Meanwhile, apparently bikers in favour of Donald Trump, so everybody declaring their particular flavour of support for their particular candidate. And just to finish with here, as the Daily Dot refers to her, an adorable girl falling asleep clutching her Hillary Clinton action figure. I suppose she doesn't quite yet know how things are going to turn out, nor do any of the rest of us.
All right, James Cruden, thank you so much for that Media Watch. We'll get back in touch with you in about an hour's time. Now, one key area for voters, of course, in the upcoming U.S. election is, as ever, the economy. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have very different ideas about everything from tax to regulation, trade. Trump wants to lower taxes for everyone, but especially for businesses and the wealthy, while Hillary Clinton's pushing for a new top tax bracket to fund training programs for the least well-off. Let's take a closer look now at just where the two presidential candidates stand on economic policy.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump clash on pretty much everything, and the economy is no different. While Trump insists on slashing taxes and reducing corporate regulation to free up the US economy, Clinton has vowed to increase taxes on the wealthiest to fund opportunities for the poorest.
There is Trump's tax plan. That would explode our national debt and eventually lead to massive cuts in priorities like education, health care, and environmental protection.
Among Trump's pledges, his vow to cut the number of tax brackets from 7 to 3. He'd also drop the top tax rate to 33% and slash corporate tax from 35% to just 15%. The Democratic candidate, meanwhile, is proposing an additional tax bracket for those earning more than $5 million a year, and tax breaks for companies that focus on expanding and hiring in the US. As for trade deals, Trump insists the US is currently being humiliated.
I pledge to never sign any trade agreement that hurts our workers or that diminishes our freedom and our independence. We are going to enforce all trade violations against any country that cheats.
He's also called for an import tariff of 35% on Mexican goods and 45% on Chinese imports. His rival says these tariffs will only make it harder for the US to compete on the world stage. But the political adversaries do occasionally see eye to eye. Both oppose the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership and both vow to fight corporate inversion, where companies register their offices abroad to avoid paying tax in America.
Well, the markets are already reacting to the results that we have so far. The Mexican peso is down more than 5% on Trump's strong showing so far. Also, the Dow down about 2%, David Endelman.
Yes, 400 points on the Dow futures. Everybody was really would be stunned if Trump came in. There was talk, actually, that if he were elected tonight, the markets could open 10, 12% lower tomorrow morning. So it's really having quite an impact, partly because of just the uncertainty of what could happen. He's in theory a good for big business candidate and so on, but big business does not trust him at all.
Angela.
No, I mean, they're very worried, I think, by his protectionist stance, by the fact that he might tear up trade pacts, he might walk away from defense alliances, and that could cause big geopolitical risks. He's also not too sure about whether the the chair of the Federal Reserve should be independent. It doesn't like Janet Yellen much, has said he will replace her, and all of those things are making investors pretty nervy. On the other hand, I doubt if they would like a clean sweep and a Democratic Hillary Clinton. They'd be happy with Clinton perhaps in power and Congress with the Republicans.
Which seems to be what's going to be happening now, because I gather the House of Representatives has been called as going to remain Republican.
Yes, the projection that we have there is that it is going to remain Republican. Not a huge surprise, we have to say. Vincent Michelot, you wanted to add something?
Well, the markets absolutely hate unpredictability. And when you cannot have a path to what is going to happen, whether it's in geopolitical terms or in economic terms, the markets will go down. And this is especially alarming for the markets, as the election is very much different from what all analysts predicted.
The other interesting point, also I would note, just to bring us up to date, is we now have almost a third of all votes counted nationwide, and yet the 137 to 104 Trump for Clinton, in terms of the electoral vote, hasn't changed in nearly an hour. In other words, there are still so many states now that are so close that it's too close to call, and this is very troubling. This should be very troubling for the Clinton folks.
All right, we are going to come back to Paris here now, or stay in Paris for the moment, with France 24's Luke Brown. Luke Brown is at a watch party here in Paris. Now, as you can imagine, there are many, many expats, American expats, who live here in the French capital and throughout France. So Luke joins us now from the Carreau du Temple, which is in the Marais district, right in the heart of Paris. Luke, what has the expat community been saying to you so far during this night?
It has to be said the atmosphere here has really evolved quite dramatically over the course of the evening. Earlier on in the evening, when very few of the results were here, it was a pretty festive atmosphere that has changed quite dramatically over the past a couple of hours or so. It really does give you an indication of just to what extent the race is extremely close, and the tensions here are really rising amongst the people who are watching it. Really do get the impression that when each of the states, some of those provisional results are coming, you do get the impression that quite a lot of people are pretty disappointed with the results that they're seeing. One of the expat community who is currently watching the results trickle in from the US is Elena Stevenson, who joins us now. You're a student, you've been here for the past year. What's the atmosphere for you tonight watching?
Well, it started out very hopeful, but things obviously have taken a turn. It's pretty shocking at this point. A lot of results come out. Florida's much closer than I had expected. The early voting seemed really an encouraging sign for Hillary Clinton, and then the numbers that we're seeing tonight make it clear that this is going to be a very close race and may go well into the night and into tomorrow morning. So the atmosphere has this is definitely a crowd of Clinton supporters overall, and things the mood is a little bit depressed at this point, but
You yourself are from Pennsylvania. What's the kind of messages that you're getting from your family and friends back in Pennsylvania?
Well, I'm in constant contact. My parents went to vote this morning. I had to vote absentee, obviously, and they were sending me pictures of the huge turnout. In 20 years voting in Pennsylvania, they had never seen such turnout. So very optimistic this morning. A lot of enthusiasm in Pennsylvania, a lot of turnout in Philadelphia County, but I just don't understand what's happened, because that's not what we're seeing when these results are trickling in. So.
You say you find it hard to understand what's happening. What about on a broader level, looking at the results that are coming in from the United States? So what do you think that says about your homeland?
I think it's a very sad day. No matter actually how this ends up in the end, I think the fact that it's this close after these 18 months, it's been a very long campaign, and I think that it really has shown the deep divisions that we have within the country that maybe before we could kind of ignore, but now those are out in the open and we're going to have to deal with them somehow. And under a Trump presidency, I'm not sure how we're going to be able to do that, since he has fermented these tensions throughout his campaign, and I think that will only get worse. So.
Okay, Elena, thank you very much. Clearly, as you can see, the emotions riding high here, but it has to be said, quite a lot of pessimism growing here. As Elena pointed out, this is something of a Clinton-friendly crowd. That pessimism does appear to be growing. Of course, they'll be watching those results trickle in for the rest of the night.
All right, Luke Brown, thank you so much for that. That's Luke reporting there from that watch party here in Paris. And it is just about 4 a.m. on the dot here in Paris right now. There it is, 10 p.m.